IXCO convener calls for in-depth review TV licensing controversy. Super Typhoon death toll in the Philippines may reach 10,000. And in Geneva, no breakthrough in talks on Iran's nuclear program.
Good evening. Executive Council convener Lam Woon Kwong has called on the chief executive to conduct an in-depth review of the free-to-air TV licensing issue. He said the controversy stemmed from the fact that the chief executive council's decision fell far short of public expectations, and a review is needed to prevent this from happening again. Ronnie Samtani reports.
Speaking after the annual Remembrance Day ceremony, Executive Council convener Lam Woon Kwong said Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying needs to conduct an in-depth review of the free-to-air TV licensing issue. Lam said there's a big gap between the public's expectations and the government's decision on the issuing of new TV licenses. He hopes the chief executive will thoroughly review the entire process to prevent similar problems in the future. But lawmaker Emily Lau said a review will not be enough.
I think it's very obvious from what Mr. W.K. Lam said, is that he thinks that the whole procedure, the whole way of handling this application for TV license gone very poorly. And I was hoping that he would go on to say that because of that, the Executive Council should reconsider the whole issue and then issue licenses to all the companies which qualify. I still hope that Mr. Lam will say that, and I would urge the Chief Executive and the Executive Council to reconsider the whole thing.
Lau, along with several members of the Democratic Party, marched to the central government's liaison office this afternoon to request the liaison office to stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs. There have been claims that certain lawmakers were asked by the central government not to support an attempt to invoke special LegCo powers to look into the free-to-air TV licensing controversy. Yesterday, political parties also staged protests here at the liaison office. They said officials have to come out and clarify the matter as soon as possible. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
Meanwhile, the Chief Executive's office issued a statement tonight saying the Chief Executive in Council followed existing mechanisms and legislation while deciding on the free-to-air TV license applications. They also consulted the Secretary for Justice and an independent barrister before making the final decision. So the decision complies with the established mechanism and procedural justice.
And the Philippines is beginning to emerge from one of the worst storms ever recorded. At least 10,000 people are believed to have died in one province alone after Super Typhoon Haiyan tore across the country. As residents begin to assess the devastation, disaster officials are struggling to cope with an unfolding humanitarian crisis. James Aiken has the latest on the catastrophe left behind by the storm and where it's going next.
Even by the standards of this country, which gets battered by about 20 typhoons a year, the scale of this disaster is enormous. When Haiyan made landfall, it was packing sustained winds of more than 300 kilometers per hour. The typhoon destroyed about 80% of the area in its path, and Leyte province took the worst of it. The city of Tacloban is virtually leveled.
The devastation is, I don't have the words for it. It's really horrific. It's a great human tragedy. There's no power, there's no light. By the time the sun sets, it's dark, and you're just gonna have to make your way to where you can find some shelter.
2/3 of the island chain has been impacted. Communication and travel are nearly impossible in some areas as people search for loved ones and scramble for food, water, and shelter.
We have so many dead people. We don't have bags. Bags for the dead kasi nakahilera lang sila maski saan-saan.
Rescuers and security forces have been overwhelmed. Special police force units are being brought in to help restore order and curb looting. Medical supplies are also running low in many areas, and aid workers are struggling to reach survivors. The Red Cross says the U.S. and other governments and agencies are mounting a major relief effort. The super typhoon is now steaming across the South China Sea. Forecasters expect it to pick up more energy as it churns towards Vietnam. Authorities there have moved almost 900,000 people in 11 central provinces to safe zones. After watching the devastation in the Philippines, emergency officials in Vietnam are telling residents to prepare for the worst. James Aiken, TVB News.
Violence broke out in Bangladesh's capital city yesterday after police detained several key opposition leaders. The main opposition party has extended a nationwide strike in protest against the arrests. Supporters of the Bangladesh National Party, or BNP, took to the streets yesterday as senior leaders of the party were taken to court. Officials said the arrests were made on charges that BNP leaders had instigated attacks on people and property. The court set the hearing for Thursday, and the defendants have been remanded in custody. Pro-BNP activists went on a rampage, torching vehicles and blocking the highway linking Dhaka with the port city of Chittagong. The opposition has also extended a general strike by 12 hours to 84 hours. The strike was originally called in a bid to force the ruling party to hold elections due by January under a caretaker government. But that was rejected by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Instead, she offered to form an all-party government to oversee the elections, with her staying in charge.
Talks between major world powers and Iran over its nuclear program have failed to reach an agreement. But delegates tried to play down the apparent frustrations, insisting that progress had been made behind the scenes.
Talks over Iran's nuclear program ended with no deal early today after France said proposed measures didn't go far enough. But afterwards, Washington's top diplomat played down suggestions the negotiations were inconclusive, insisting progress had been made.
As President Obama has said, his goal is, since day one as president, to make certain that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon. There's no question in my mind that we are closer now as we leave Geneva than we were when we came, and that with good work and good faith over the course of the next weeks, we can, in fact, secure our goal.
But later in the day, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani underscored how reaching an agreement will be a tricky task when he pledged Tehran wouldn't compromise over its right to uranium enrichment. The talks featured the European Union's major powers, Germany, France and Britain, as well as the United States, China, Russia and, of course, Iran. America and its allies are looking for initial caps on Iran's ability to make an atomic bomb, while Tehran wants to ease sanctions that are crippling its economy. But France would not soften its concerns over Iran's nuclear program and the level of its uranium enrichment program. The European Union's foreign policy chief was ever the diplomat when asked if France was unnecessarily difficult in its demands.
They played an important role today, as they do on every negotiation, along with their colleagues from the other countries.
Even Iran was trying to look on the bright side of things.
Obviously, the 6 countries may have differences of views, but we are working together, and hopefully we will be able to reach an agreement when we meet again.
All parties agreed to resume talks on November 20th. Today's events show the enormous complexity facing negotiators after a generation of mistrust between Iran and the West. Indeed, any agreement would be a breakthrough after nearly a decade of mostly inconclusive discussions.
Well, the United States Navy christened its latest aircraft carrier with the traditional smashing of a bottle of sparkling wine across the bow. Named after former President Gerald Ford, it's the lead ship in the U.S. Navy's next class of nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. The vessel is designed to get more fighter planes in the sky in less time and to be ready to incorporate unmanned aircraft into its air wing. It's the first carrier redesign in 4 decades and is scheduled to join the fleet in 2016. The Supreme Court of the Maldives has postponed a presidential runoff for 6 days after a protest was lodged by one of the candidates. The move prolongs the country's political crisis, which started in September when election results were annulled because of alleged irregularities. Yesterday, former President Mohamed Nasheed won the vote but failed to get an outright majority. The second round should have taken place today, but runner-up Abdullah Yamin sought a delay, saying he needed more time to campaign.
Students in Istanbul are protesting a government plan to eliminate mixed-sex accommodation in state-run dormitories. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan said last week that his ruling Conservative Party will no longer allow men and women to live in the same government dormitories. Erdogan later referred to illegitimate lifestyles while speaking about the housing issue. Students say they're being unfairly targeted. They accuse their Prime Minister of interfering in their personal lives and using his power to erode basic freedoms. Erdogan's government has passed new rules curbing alcohol, but it has backed off plans to limit access to abortions. And still to come in the news. A man swept away by waves in Lantau. Hong Kong's first Grandparents' Day. And Russian cosmonauts carry the Olympic torch on a spacewalk.